On this episode of the John 1911 podcast, low flow Glocks, Suppressor Baffle strike, new target cameras, and the Tundra breaks. Okay, good evening everybody. Today is Sunday, October 26th at 10:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this is episode 386 of the John 1911 podcast. This is going to be a solo episode. Getting a little bit of a late start tonight. It's been an unusually busy weekend for me. A lot going on. Nothing I really care to share with the listener, but just whether it's stuff with the business or stuff personally, there's always something going on. So I'm getting a little bit of a late start. So I guess we will start. For someone that's trying to start, I'm saying start an awful lot. So let's get started. This has been beat to death now by everybody since the last podcast, but I guess it's my turn to give a take on it. And I guess the news about the Glock V series pistols, which to me obviously was an automatic reference to the Roman numeral number 5. And this is not a Glock Generation 6 gun, as people are saying. They would have planned it differently if it was. They would have just rolled out a Gen 6. This is obviously something that they've decided to do because they have impending litigation and issues from various states. And I think the drama has waxed and waned on this as far as are they, I don't know, here's people like they're bootlickers or they're this or they're that. I mean, the reality is they're getting sued to high heaven on these switches. And I don't claim to know a lot about switches. We do have them here in Cincinnati. They don't talk about it, but if you listen to some of the shot spotter audio, or if the Cincinnati police in particular may put out some video or audio from something where they're looking for something, and you can definitely hear that it's a fully automatic, very high rate of fire, probably a pistol, which means it's probably a Glock switch system. And a couple things, I guess. I have a lot of feelings on this, and my feelings are probably a little different than most people's. I mean, as a business person, Glock has to deal with this, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's very easy to see how they could get destroyed on this. Seriously, Glock could get destroyed. Once they start, one lawsuit starts, and then there's discovery, and you're into what did you know and when did you know it? Like, when did Glock first become aware that this switch thing might be a problem, on a design level? When did Glock first decide, is there conversations in Glock and email or memos where they're like, we should think about doing something about this thing in the Gen 4 series. And it's like, we're already halfway designed on this, and this is illegal, and it's not my problem. So we're just going, it's too much money. We can't stop now. So while that is all true, you could very easily see some, I guess be a trial lawyer, because it's not necessarily a criminal case. I mean, it could be, but it's a civil case, a civil tort. Turning this into more than just beyond the reasonable doubt. In civil cases, it's a preponderance of the evidence. So mathematically, that would be a 51% likely, that they knew or they didn't deal with it or whatever. So there's that whole factor. And I'm aware of there's is it the Firearm Owners Protection Act, where supposedly, or I can't remember the law. Is it FOPA, where they supposedly you can't sue these gun companies out of business? It's a federal law, but I mean, I guess, I don't know. Maybe there's an NFA angle here or something. So, which I'll circle back to. So there's the business aspect for Glock. Now, what is this going to mean for for all the companies that are cloning Glocks. It was the reason why um, there's the people that are into these switches, that make these switches. The reason why they do it is because there's a wide audience, because there's a lot of Glocks out there. I don't know how many Glocks have been made. I mean, it's probably millions. And I don't even know. I've never actually seen a switch in real life. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. I've seen real Glock 18s. Now, the Glock 18 doesn't use a switch. It actually uses that's a lever built into the slide that they, they basically build the equivalent of a switch in the slide of the gun. Um, I know there's aftermarket post samples, ee '07 manufacturers that have made switches. I've seen those on the internet, but there's so many companies, Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5 Glocks that can accept these. And there's so many companies. Now, even Ruger is making a copy of a Glock. And I don't know how much I haven't paid them much attention. I don't know how much of a copy of the Glock is, but I'm pretty certain it's pretty close. And part of the reason why the companies can do it is because the technical patents on the technology have expired. It's been over 20 years. And that's also part of the reason why Glock is kind of incentivized, and some other companies are incentivized, technology companies, to kind of re-roll some stuff before about every 20 years goes by, because people can start using the IP. Or unless they can make some kind of incremental change and try to defend it. So there's Glock's got the financial exposure. There's the there's the mass market. Like, there's so many of these guns out there. Um, I don't know. Like, is California now going to go after Ruger? Are they going to go after PSA? Are they going to go after Wolf? I don't even know. I couldn't even name all the companies that make Glock. Um, so that's something to watch out for, because that's definitely going to be an attack vector here. Because obviously this isn't really about switches. I mean, on some level, I'm sure it is for some, but the reality is this is mostly a gun control issue by Gavin Newsom and the radical left to just find some other reason to go after gun companies. And this is really not any different than what they've done for, say, the emission standards. The emission standards that's screwed up all this stuff in the United States. I mean, the diesel and the DEF fluid. I mean, that's the federal law, but a lot of this stuff started in California. And because California is such a large market, it doesn't make sense for certain manufacturers to have two versions of the same product. You see this with school books, and this was something probably most of our listeners have never heard of. This was kind of a brouhaha years ago when there was a big debate about what do you put in history books, or what do you put in school books. But primarily it was history books. How do you describe, certain things in American history? Do you describe things in American history with a little generosity, or do you describe things in American history with your kind of a modern view, or do you describe things in American history with maybe a dispassionate, third party, removed, telling of a story? And Texas is a large state with a lot of school systems in it, and California is a large state with a lot of school systems in it. And companies that print school books, I don't even know if they use school books anymore. I just realized just how out of control this example may be for the listener. It's like, oh my God, like, this could be crazy. We talk about horses in the time of cars. But anyway, back when they had school books in school, these large states would place orders with such large orders that the economy of scale, it wasn't cost effective for the printers to have different versions of different books for 50 different states or 48 different states. Basically, it was, once they kind of settled on a book for California and Texas, that's what everybody else got. And that's how a lot of this kind of started. That's an example back in the day. The emission stuff I've already talked about. Now we're dealing with the gun thing. Now there's something else I want to talk about here, which I think is kind of needs to be mentioned. I'm aware that there are people that 3D print switches, I guess, and I mean I assume there are. Um, I have not really interfaced with any big city law enforcement in a long time to have an understanding of where these switches are coming from. My understanding was most of these switches are coming in from China because they're being smuggled in or shipped in surreptitiously as airsoft parts or something else. And it's, in all practical purposes, I mean, they're legally in the United States, a switch by itself on a counter without a gun anywhere around it, legally in the United States, that is considered a machine gun, a switch. By itself, you could be charged with possessing that, without it being on the registered paperwork. That is possessing a machine gun. Um, it's interesting that the certain parties. I'm not even. I don't care. I don't speak obliquely. The left doesn't seem to give a flying fuck about the border. They don't give two shits about dope coming into the country. They don't care about illegals. They don't care about criminals. They don't care about you know possibly terrorists and smuggling in weapons. But all of a sudden now they're real upset about these fucking switches that are all coming in from fucking China, most of them. And it's like, it kind of reminds me of Chicago, and it kind of reminds me of crime in a lot of these cities. Liberal Democrats are not actually interested in solving crime and stopping crime. What they do is they use increases in crime to push political agendas, to start restrictions and programs and money. It's creating a crisis to get political power. And for some reason, the left doesn't give a holy fuck about the border or any of the smuggling or the shit that comes in, whether it's coming with Jose across the Rio Grande or whether it's some guy named Chen who's shipping shit in a UPS package, in the port of Long Beach, you know. But now all of a sudden, because they care about these switches, but they don't want to stop the switches, the Temu switches coming from China. They want to put a Glock out of business. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, it's kind of bullshit, but kind of par for the course. How is that any different than what was it, the Fast and Furious thing that the left tried to do? We know they did this. This is not a conspiracy theory. They let a bunch of guns go into Mexico, untraceable, untrackable, to create chaos, to end up, empowering criminals, violent criminals in Mexico, resulting in the deaths of civilians, so they could create an international crisis with guns from the United States involved in this crap in Mexico, so they could turn around and ban guns here in the U.S. I mean, this to me is just another one. It's the same thing, different day. So there's that thing, which, here we go again. What's Glock supposed to do? Glock can't fight our battles here. Glock has to stay Glock doesn't do Glock any good to go out of business and get bankrupted. And one of the problems Glock has two problems here. They have two problems. The first problem is that they're a large company, and I think they are a privately held entity. I believe they're still owned by the Glock family. The woman, I believe, is still the shareholder. The younger Mrs. Glock the second, the younger woman, the blonde woman. That's a privately held company, so I don't know how much they're worth or what their revenue is worldwide, but it's a lot. I mean, it's got to be. I mean, Glock, I couldn't even, as a worldwide entity, I don't even know. Could it be $1 billion company? Which, if you think, an average person listening to this probably doesn't really appreciate it. And I'm going to be wildly wrong on this, but I just want to prove a point because it makes them a target to people, the hippies. So you look at companies like FN and you look at companies like, you know, H&K. H&K is not really a good example, but FN's a good example. FN is a large international military defense contractor. They make all kinds of stuff. Glock makes one thing. They make little plastic pistols. And they are huge because they are sold everywhere. Off the top of my head, I haven't looked this up. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz on the podcast, or I would have studied. I seem to recall, if I remember, there was a Glock factory in Austria. There's a Glock factory in the US. For some reason, if I remember correctly, I think there's a Glock factory somewhere in South America. I don't know if it's in Brazil. Brazil probably not because of Taurus. Maybe it's in Argentina. I feel like there's a Glock factory in South America, and I'm fairly certain, at least at one point, I don't know how it goes now, but there was a licensed clone for Glock in Russia. And I don't know, maybe they were shipping them parts and they were doing final assembly in Russia, but there's a Russian Glock. Like it's actual, not a copy, it's a Glock. So, it's more than just, the US. Well, the problem with that is Glock makes so much money. Every bullshit lawyer and every crappy 2-bit prosecutor and every wannabe politician is going to look at Glock like scratch-off tickets at the gas station for very little money because typically they're, it's cost them nothing to file bullshit lawsuits. They can take a quarter and, for $1 and they can scratch off and maybe they'll get the $1 million, $5 million settlement, judgment, or whatever. And Glock knows that this is coming. And I don't know how many lawyers work for Glock, but I promise you it's more than 5. And they probably have, I'm sure they have in-house counsel, but I'm sure Glock is probably contracted with a law firm or has probably like a major law firm on retainer that does a myriad of things. They might even have 2. I know they have one that handles their patent and their IP. We'll just call it their IP. And then I'm sure they have one that deals with them on the technology side and the criminal defense side, like the civil defense side. And Glock, anything they can do to disincentivize the scratch off phenomenon, that's why they're going to have to look into it with all that. Now, with that all being said, what is my feeling? And I've kind of come down off this a little bit because I have consumed other people's content on this. We own Glocks. I carried Glock for a little while. I like Glocks. I don't have a problem with Glocks at all. My opinion, which is kind of interesting because I guess it's the least popular Glock, my opinion is no Glock was really worth a damn out of the box until the Gen 4. So once the Gen 4s came out and we got a taste of it, we bought that's all the Glocks we have except for like the training guns, the red guns. They're all Glock Gen 4s. And I've personally never bought a Gen 5. I don't have a problem with a Gen 5. I think a Gen 5 is a good gun, a good upgrade. The ambidextrous slide release and I guess even a better trigger. But I thought the Gen 4 trigger was fine. And the reality with a Glock trigger, how you get a good Glock trigger, you get 1,000 rounds and you shoot it. You get 1,000 rounds, you shoot it. You get 1,000 rounds and you shoot it. And there's your Glock trigger work. But here's my problem with this. And this is going to circle back to California and Gavin Newsom and the hippies and all this. Okay. You get these bullshit people. Okay. Let me say this before I get into it. There are going to be people out there that are going to make the argument in the gun community that Glock, this will be fine, this will be better, this will be just as good, or whatever the reason is. My argument is, if this change would make Glock better, Glock would have made it. They wouldn't have been forced to do it. The market makes the better product, not the bullshit politicians and not the sometimes trial lawyers, but not the bullshit politicians. Okay? And I have example. We're surrounded by examples. We're surrounded by examples. So let me just lay this out for you. We live in a world where all the gasoline trucks are basically tearing themselves apart because they're so lean on emissions that these things are just blowing up to meet cafe standards. None of the diesel shit works. Between the DEF fluid and the DPF filters, it used to be you could buy a diesel pickup truck and it would run forever. The same things happen. All the tractors are all fucked up. All this DPF DEF, all this emission shit is fucked up. All the heavy equipment, all this stuff. None of this shit works right. And it's not just this kind of stuff. The toilets don't work right anymore. You have to flush it. A grown man, 200 some pounds who eats a lot of protein, I got to flush a toilet 4 times every time I use it. How is that saving water? How is that more efficient? The shower heads don't put any water out anymore, any pressure anymore because of all this bullshit. So you end up having to take longer showers or do all this. The washing machines don't fucking work well anymore. You have to, they don't wash stuff as well. Or this is even better. And you guys know this is true. Ask your wives. If you guys don't do laundry, I do my own laundry. Ask your wives this shit. The washing machines all stink now. And you can't get them clean. Why? Because they don't use enough water to clean themselves. So what you end up doing is you get these low flow washing machines, and then you have to run clean cycles in them constantly to try to get the mold out of them, which you never can be 100% successful at because they just don't use enough water. But you're using more water because the things are so lean because you have to run cleaning cycles. You're not saving any water. The dishwashers are all this way. And it's just like, okay, so you assholes in California, and I'm using California as a placeholder. It's not California. If you're living in California, I really don't mean California. I'm talking about you fucking assholes that think you know better than everybody fucking else. You think, you have fucked all this other shit up. So now you're going to make Glock make these changes. And here's my fear. Is the Glock V going to be, fine? Is it going to be durable? Is it going to be reliable? Is it going to be everything that Glock is supposed to be? Glock has built its reputation on? Because what's the point of Glock? And so let me educate someone who might be listening to this that doesn't understand guns. Some miracle that you're here. But let me just make this point. Glock isn't Glock because it's Glock. No one gives a fuck about Glock, okay? Glock is Glock because it has a track record of 40 and 50, 40 years of durability and reliability. And already I have heard people looking at this Glock V stuff and what they're getting from inside of Glock corporate that not only is there going to be backplate changes, there's going to be trigger system changes. And apparently, in specifically what I saw one guy mention was there's a piece in a Glock that's part of this trigger system, and they call it the cruciform because it looks kind of like a little, I would call it Orthodox cross. And apparently, there's a Glock performance trigger that you can put in Glocks that Glock just came out with. Again, Glock Perfection, but they came out with this fancy trigger, and people put it in, and when you buy that trigger and you put it in, it isn't cruciform. That piece, I guess it looks like a T instead of it being cruciform. And apparently that trigger, that system isn't as durable as the standard cruciform system. What I mean is you end up having to clean this gun every 600 rounds or 300 rounds or whatever it is. And okay, well, that's not an upgrade to me. That's making the gun worse. Well, apparently this Glock V series gun does the same thing. Apparently it gets rid of this cruciform that's in all the Glocks since forever, I believe. And now they're going to have to do something else so they can't fuck with these guns on the inside. They're going to make them worse. And for someone like me if I was in a position where I had to, it's one thing to carry a gun personally and to be responsible for my own personal safety and personal weapon, and maybe my family, or maybe, friends, or, if you're an individual and just your life, like within anywhere from 0 to 25 feet around you, or whatever you envision your universe being. Okay. It's one thing to have to make a decision. Can I carry this? Can I deal with it? Can I maintenance it? Am I willing to, can I absorb, can I run the actuarial numbers to see if I'm not going to have a problem? Can I tolerate the risk? And it's another thing entirely to be sitting in a position of authority where you have to make a decision between buying 25, 50, 75, 100, 500 of these guns. And you're looking, it's like, the only ones we can get now are the Glock V series, and I'm responsible for some small police department. I'd be like, oh, fuck. I mean, you guys go first. And this, like, and my position on this isn't strange. This has been true throughout history. How many of you heard from your grandfathers and your fathers every time a new car comes out? Don't buy the first year. Don't buy the first year. Give them some time to work out the kinks. Right? You've all heard that. They come out with new what was it? They had a thing where it was, I think Microsoft at one point, somebody said, don't use the even or don't use the odd operating systems for Windows, because whenever they switch to the odd one, it's kind of new. I can't remember what it is, but it's basically, let them work out the kinks. Don't be the guinea pig. I mean, shit SIG, but even throughout history, you look at the US military, and you see a military that was using single shot, falling block, or trapdoor, guns, and there were lever actions around. And the military didn't want to use those because the military was afraid it was unproven technology, and they were afraid that they'd buy a bunch of these things and there'd be some yet undiscovered problem on some battlefield somewhere, and then it's a real problem. And I got to tell you, my experiences with the toilets and the dishwashers and, the fucking shower heads, I don't want fucking shit to do with this Glock V fucking thing. I mean, I hope at some point in the future that it's like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm sure, honestly, it probably will be. I hope it's no big deal. But, man, fuck that. I don't want any part of it. I mean, in my personal Glock collection, which is part of the reference collection of John 1911, during COVID, we actually did sell a few guns. I sold a couple. And I don't need to tell you everything I sold, but I did sell a couple Glocks relative to this. And they were Glock Gen 4s, and they were Glock 19s, and they were FDE. And so that was like some special thing. And I sold them for a couple reasons. When we were acquiring Glocks, we went through this Glock acquisition phase, I started realizing that the Glock 19 sucks for me because my hands are big. And the gun's too small in the grip for me, and you got to put a magwell on it or do whatever. I like a Glock 17, or they came out with the Glock 45, right? Or this Glock 47. I have a Glock 17 Gen 4 FDE in the reference collection, and my goal was to get another Glock 17, or I've thought about maybe getting one of these 47s, maybe a Gen 5. I will still probably do that. I'll look around and pick something up. I don't want to overpay. I'm not going to pay, a penny more for a Glock than, what they are. But I mean, I wouldn't touch a Glock Gen V thing with John Holmes' dick right now. I mean, I'm just like, I don't want nothing to do with it. I'm sure it'll be fine, but you know what? Y'all go ahead, let me know how it's going. Wow, 30 minutes talking about Glock. Holy shit. So, okay, a couple more things let's get into a little bit. We posted a video, I think it was from Firepower United, of a guy. It looks like he was at a match. I think it's a USPSA match. I believe I was told that he was carrying a 38 Super. I believe it was a 1911, like some kind of race gun, 2011 gun. and he goes to draw it from the holster and shoots himself in the leg. And for some reason, it's like this new phenomenon. Every time there's a gun accident video, everyone starts talking about like these guys that are defending the SIG P320. They're like, I've had a 320 for years and I never had a problem. And it's like, okay, well, what the fuck does that have to do with a guy shoot himself with a 2011 at a USPSA match, who obviously grabbed the gun? I mean, it was like beep, and he fucking goes to grab it, and I don't know if he had deactivated safety, if he knocked this, I don't know the condition of the gun, but he touched that gun and set it off. Or maybe he bumped it and his trigger was too racy and it went off. But this has nothing to do with a SIG P320. But psychologically, even the 320 defenders, every time a gun has an accident somewhere, they want to roll in and they're like, oh, yeah, my gun's fine. It's like, okay, great. Like, we're not talking about you. A couple other things. I saw this one and I thought it was really an interesting story. And it's an AI story, but it's a gun story. And we'll have it linked in the show notes and the comment, on the website. But basically, some school somewhere, I guess some company is selling an AI software solution that will detect a gun on a camera. And so they're selling it to schools. And so the argument is, if this AI system sees a gun, not if it hears a gun, if it sees a gun, it will, call home the mama or call the front office, call the principal, call the popo, and everybody comes running. And it's an interesting use of technology. And, it's a great way to save time. Don't wait till the shooting starts to maybe start your response. It's pretty interesting. I'm not for or against it, but I can see this showing up places and being places where, this might be something you have to deal with in the future. But apparently there was a student who was in school in a hall. I assume he was in a hallway somewhere. And I guess, I don't know if it was like flaming Doritos or whatever it was, some kind of little cellophane chip bag. He pulls it out, takes a chip, crumples it up, and then puts it in his pocket. And I don't know if the camera reads the cellophane or the like is metal or however this is supposed to work, but because I don't think it was a shape, but I'm sure that software is proprietary as to the parameters that they would use, so they wouldn't tell us exactly how they come to this conclusion. But it apparently set off the holy shit, there's a gun, at whatever school. And so, as you can imagine, this kid, there's no alarms, there's no shooting, there's no nothing. No one knows anything in the school. And all of a sudden, first responders show up, and this kid's in the hallway. It's like, man, the cops are here. Well, what's going on? I hope everything's, like whatever he's thinking. Suddenly they're coming to him and they're like, drop the gun. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? So, one, this is going to be something that this technology is going to proliferate. These gun detecting software and gun software that can detect guns even under your clothing, that's going to start being an issue for CCW holders. But this story made me realize what's also going to be an issue is this AI system going ape shit and then causing accidents. There's a liability here. The story that we post isn't about the liability of the AI system or the exposure of the company, but I promise you, just like a Glock, there's somebody sitting around going, what's the exposure financially to a false positive and everything that could go wrong when people are keyed up to gun, and what if something does go wrong? And then what if something happens where the person's legally carrying? And then everyone shows up and it's not just, our bad, but it turns into some kind of accident. The police show up with a SIG P320 and pointing it at the guy and the gun accidentally goes off. Like, that sounds fanciful, but I promise you it's not. And, it's just going to be really interesting to see this the technology curve with a lot of this stuff. We're gonna be living in a world in 10 years that's gonna look very different from the world that we live in now when it comes to security and how things operate. And I've said this before, and I haven't said it in a long time, but I'm going to go ahead and say this since we're talking about guns and we're talking about AI, we're talking about technology, and we're talking about California and the switch thing and everything, all that. Um, they're going to ban drones. They're going to have to. And, I don't know exactly what that means. Like, they can't ban drones. I don't know. I think there's going to come a point here in our lifetime, and it's going to be sooner rather than later. We're going to see the civilian ownership of drones is going to be more heavily controlled than firearms. I promise you this is true. I promise you this will happen. You'll start seeing restrictions on drones, like you cannot own a drone as a civilian that weighs more than, say, I don't know, 2 pounds. Or you can't have a drone as a civilian that can lift more weight than, say, 15 ounces. Um, or you can't have a drone as a civilian that can't travel farther than X distance. Because not only are we going to be seeing, issues with drones, obviously on the battlefield, we're going to start seeing issues with drones with people hurting other people. And I'm not just talking about political assassinations like some of the things we've seen out there. It's entirely possible that you're going to end up seeing either a crazy person running a drone at it's either my bet is the tipping point for regulating drones. Something bad's going to happen. It's going to make the news, and the news is going to turn it to 11. And it's either going to be an estranged lover, probably boyfriend on girlfriend, running a drone at some girl and killing her with his little whatever, commercial itty bitty teeny drone. Or it's going to be a situation where it's going to be the same thing, and a crazy person, a stalker who's obsessed with a celebrity, is going to end up killing a celebrity with a drone. And it'll be something like, it'll be some major celebrity. And I've seen this happen in the past. I remember there was many years ago, if I recall, there was a TV show called Mork and Mindy. And nobody remembers this because I'm old. Nanu Nanu with uh, uh, um, um, uh, Robin Williams, and I think it was Mork and Mindy. Wasn't Pam Dyer? What? No. But there was maybe this woman was on Mork and Mindy. There was some little actress girl, you know, like a second tier actress or maybe third tier, kind of climbed the second tier, and she's doing cameos on like Mork and Mindy and his other shows. And some dude who's crazy about her knocked on her apartment door in California. He'd been stalking her and blew her away with a 44 in the doorway. And it made national. It was a big story. It was like the first time, I think, in like the 70s, 80s, well, in the 80s, that was like a real celebrity stalker death. Like when I was a kid or younger person, it was a big deal. I feel like that's going to happen again with drones. Um, and let's talk about this for a minute. To circle back to the Glock issue but talking about the drones. Okay, machine guns are heavily controlled in this country. And who would have ever thought when the first switches came in or whatever existed, you know, that we'd be in a situation where they're going to try to ban all the Glocks. Well, you can't ban all the Glocks. It's impossible. You can't ban these guns. There's too many of them. They've been making them for 40 years. They've literally been making these guns for 40 years. And then everybody else is copying these guns. You can't ban these. Well, I got news for you. For all intents and purposes, they banned them. Never mind the argument, by the way, that, well, okay, the military can have machine guns. The police can have machine guns. The government can have machine guns. All the criminals have machine guns in forms of switches, but I can't have a machine gun, new machine gun. I mean, there is an interesting argument to be made about with these switches, but there's an interesting argument to be made about going after the Hughes Amendment and even cracking open the NFA entirely. This idea of like exotic and rare and all this, it's like, I don't know. Apparently, if there's so many of these switches everywhere that they're no longer exotic and rare, that we got to start going after the Glock, maybe we need to reevaluate the machine gun rules, because apparently everyone's got machine guns but me. Well, once people start figuring out some of this stuff with these drones, I'm not nervous about it because I don't really care about drones personally. But you know what? Let me bookend the drone thing, and I'm gonna get off the drone thing just to prove a point. Because the person listening to this, it's like the little drone. I said 15 ounces, only can carry so much, only do so much, do whatever, right? So at the John 1911 range, I hinted around about this over the summer. I saw something that I had never seen before, and I was out in the range, and I was doing some cutting, and one of our neighboring farmers had brought in a vendor. I mean, this is just a couple guys. There were like 3 or 4 of them. They had a like a dually pickup truck with a trailer, and they had a drone, and they were spraying these cornfields. And this drone, I mean, I couldn't believe how big this drone was. This thing was as big as a Honda Civic. I mean, I don't know what this thing cost, but it could obviously carry quite a bit of weight. And I'm sure that it's, costs a lot of money, and there's probably licensing because it's a commercial endeavor. But these guys operating this drone, they're not any different than just buying a tractor. I don't know who they were, but they're not, whatever. And I'm not even saying that you need to have licensing for drones or you need licensing for guns. All I'm saying is this thing was so unbelievably powerful and had range and power that if I was a Secret Service, I'd be scared shitless of this fucking thing. I mean, this thing was a monster. And if it's comes zooming at you at 30 miles an hour, or I don't know how fast this thing would go, I mean, it could be bad. And I just, I think we're in this technology. We're obviously in a time period, kind of like the early part of the 20th century, when things are changing so fast. We're trying to get a handle on what's considered normal. And for our older listeners, this. Here's a perfect example. Everybody thought, everyone was surprised World War I started with like trench warfare. And then tanks showed up. And then World War II was maneuver warfare. And then it was the age of the battleship and slugging it out. And there were a lot of people that didn't believe aircraft carriers were going to be the next big thing. And then it was, and just we're seeing all this technology change. And it's going to be really interesting to see whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, and I'm not necessarily so certain that it's always going to be the Republicans on your side, what they're going to try to do to clamp down on some of this stuff and how it's going to hurt your rights. Okay, I can't remember exactly what I said on the last episode, so I'll just go ahead and touch on it here. Yes, we did buy a Grenadier. I've been driving it. Unfortunately, while also picking up the Grenadier at the exact same week, the Toyota Tundra, my daily driver, my sweet baby Tundra, that has about 260,000 miles on it. It's a few thousand miles short, maybe like 258. Turns out it needs a complete engine overhaul. So, it's been in the shop for, 10 days, almost 2 weeks now. And the bill's probably about $7,000. So they're, doing all these seals. Since they had to go in there, we're putting all new chains on it, belts and chains, like timing chains and all that. So there's pictures of it. So, that's kind of interesting. I've been driving the new Grenadier a little bit. I have taken it to the back of the range, and it does do things that the Tundra, the Grenadier in regular four-wheel drive, which is what it resides in at all times, will do things that the Tundra would only do in probably four-wheel low, just because of the conditions, and that's not really a surprise. I mean, they're just different vehicles for different purposes. So I've got about 1,200 miles on the Grenadier, and it's a pretty neat truck. We'll do some videos on it, and some content. We're not going to turn in like the Grenadier channel or anything, but I have been expanding. I guess I should talk about this for the website. I have been expanding the categories on the website because I've kind of turned there's hunting in the hunting and outdoors, and so things like off-road vehicles, Grenadiers, ATVs, UTVs. Kraken's real big into like UTVs and all that kind of stuff, and so content like that would go into like outdoor stuff, and so I feel like we could expand kind of some of our depth on the website with the content, because you'll notice I'm really starting to put the content out now that a lot of this construction is over. So yeah, you may see some Grenadier stuff. The Tundra will still be here. It'll definitely always be the range truck, and so that's not going away. So you Toyota fans, there's nothing to worry about there. And we'll skip some of the. I was going to do a bullfighting update because I love bullfighting, but I haven't talked about it in so long. So I think a lot of you who are new don't know that. So maybe we'll save it for the next one. But if you have any good bullfighting stories, always send me, especially videos. Send me the bullfighting videos to the armory at john911.com, or no, podcast at john911.com. Send me bullfighting videos because I like the videos, and I like bullfighting. Like, it's not, I don't like bullfighting the way some people like bullfighting. I find it really interesting. I find a lot of professional sports kind of bullshit. It's like I just can't get hyped about this football game is the most important football game of all the football games in the history of football games, especially considering we have 16 football games to play this year, but this one's going to be the most important ever. And then next week it's the same thing, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, we out there fighting with a bull. Sometimes the bull wins, and sometimes the bull loses. Sometimes you win, sometimes the bull wins. And I don't root for the bull to win. I recognize it. I think I have more of a pure appreciation for bullfighting than probably the average modern sensibility, which is not politically correct. And I've always kind of hidden it. And which is, I've never been a big Ernest Hemingway fan either. I don't really much care for a lot of Hemingway's work, except for one thing for sure, but I'm not going to mention it here. So yeah, for someone that's not going to talk about bullfighting, I've seen like I'm talking about bullfighting. A couple of things. Let's see. One more thing that happened. Doc was at the range, and he's got all kinds of weird guns now. He's got his Christensen Arm 6.5, and he's got some 280 Ackley Weatherby gun. But we had an incident. Didn't have an incident, but I was inspecting some of Doc's equipment, and he's got this Thunder Beast suppressor, and he got this thing because that's what a lot of the SWAT guys are running, or they recommended it to him. And I think Doc just does direct thread. He didn't get it. I don't think he got it, or maybe he did. No, that was a different gun. I think this just direct threads on. Yeah, I'm almost certain that it does. And so anyway, I was looking at his suppressor because he had some kind of little issue with a couple of his shots, and he was looking at it, and it's like, oh, there's no issues there, like there's no strikes. But because you look at it and you skylight it, because he was just looking at like kind of like the muzzle, like the external muzzle, and I skylighted it, and I was looking at the concentric rings going down, and I could see a scallop out of one of them, and I'm like, dude, you got a baffle strike here. And I could just see it relative to lining up the holes and skylining it. You could see that there was something was oblong in there. So I flipped it around, took a flashlight, and sure as hell on the very first baffle, He's got this horrendous, like folded over, it's out of the way, folded over strike on his Thunder Beast. And I guess he hasn't really had any issues with it. And he's looking at it and it's like, it didn't happen this week when he was shooting. It apparently he thinks it happened when he was having issues with the Scar 20S, which he subsequently sold. He had a lot of problems with that gun. And I believe 100% that he got baffle strikes with that Scar 20. And Doc loved his Scar 17, and he got to the Scar 20, and that was a turd and a half. So just from precision, right? Yeah. So anyway, it was interesting. We'll have some pictures of Doc's baffle strike. I was able to. It's kind of hard to get pictures of it, but I do have some, and I'll post them this week. And also along those lines, because we've been doing a lot more precision rifle stuff. I've been trying to upgrade the target camera system. And I was in Jackson Hole a while ago, and I was dealing with this outfitter girl, and her name is Meadow. Hello, Meadow, if you ever happen to hear this. Meadow in Jackson Hole. She doesn't live in Jackson Hole because she can't afford to live in Jackson Hole. She works in Jackson Hole and then commutes. And if you've ever been to Jackson Hole, you understand what I'm talking about. And Meadow is an outfitter, and she's a guide. And Meadow had something that I had never seen before, and I was like, "Wow, what the hell is that?" And so Meadow had, let me tell you her setup. So she had Swarovski glass, like she's like gave me Swarovski binos, like the EL, like the great Swarovski EL binos. I was like, wow, these are nice, thanks. And she had Swarovski spotting scope. I can't remember the power on it. She had a little tripod, and she would run the setup, and she'd set up her tripod to look at an animal, and then she would take her phone and she would practically drop the phone onto the eyepiece, and the camera, she could take pictures or video and zoom and do all this this gorgeous thing. And she did this enough times, and I started looking, I'm like, what's going on here? And the reason I'm telling this story is, I've got this contraption that I have to mount the phone in, and then I got to bolt it to the spotting scope, and then everything's got to be zeroed, and it shakes and does all this, and there can be some shadow and parallax, and then you go to switch it to a different target, and then you got to start it kind of like it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like you want to get film hits at 100 yards, and you want to film hits at 300 yards, and you want to film hits at 500 yards. And by the time you're at 500, shit's so fucked up. I'm screwing with these cameras, and shooters want to shoot, and it's super frustrating. And I basically have stopped using my camera system. Well, Meadow, she's got this magnetic system from something called Ollin, Ollin. And what it is they make a piece that fits over glass. Well, you know what? Let me say this. They make custom pieces that fit over the eyepieces, the eyepiece of various pieces of glass. They make them for the eyepieces on spotting scopes. They make them for the eyepieces on binoculars. They make them for, eyepieces on, pirate telescopes. And then what they do is they make a camera case, a phone case, and on the back of the phone case is like a structure that's over the lenses on the camera on, say, your iPhone. And this thing will cover up some of the, because if you got an iPhone with multiple, or any camera phone with multiple lenses, like one's for macro and one's for zoom and one's for this, well, it'll I can't remember which one they choose, but they block out all the other lenses. And then there's a I guess it's maybe there's a piece of metal in the iPhone, then the magnets on the glass. And so as soon as you drop the phone in the case on that spotting scope, it's perfect zero every time into the lens of that iPhone or that camera phone. And it's dynamite. I mean, it's something that like a SWAT team could use this. I have never seen this before. And I was talking to her about it, and I was taking pictures of it, and I'm looking at it. I've been talking to Alan about it. I've been talking to Zeiss about our scope. And then, long story short, is Alan doesn't make an eyepiece cover for the Zeiss field glass that we have. We're talking to about maybe making a custom one. So yesterday, which just killed me to do this, I ran out to, not Cabela's, what's the other one? Bass Pro. Ran out to Bass Pro and had to buy a spotting scope. Sucks. And I literally had to look at the list of like what spotting scopes that they support, and I ended up the cheapest I could find was a Leopold. I can't remember the power on the scope. And it was like a $500 scope, and so I've ordered this Allen eyepiece system, and it's coming. And we're gonna hopefully you'll be seeing some really interesting precision rifle stuff, target cameras. I mean, heck, we can maybe even do some stuff with pistol and paper targets at distance. Like it could be really interesting. So I could set up a camera to film, impacts on paper at distance and not have to worry about the camera being down there. So I don't know, like I'm excited about it. This is something that, when you run content on a website, it kind of keeps you up at night. And old Meadow out there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, I'm like the last person to ever see this product. That's probably everyone listening to this podcast has probably heard of this stuff. I had never heard of it, and it's the one thing I brought back that I'm like, man, I gotta get me one of those. Okay, we've been going about an hour because I talked too long about Glock, and so I'm going to skip a bunch of the politics and some of my pop culture stuff. I'm going to save that for the boys. I definitely have opinions on the Trump ballroom. Oddly enough, I actually have some previous experience with the East Wing of the White House, which is like not the cool side. But we'll save that for a podcast with the boys. I know for sure Kraken is going to be around later in the week, and I'll reach out to Danny and get all the boys together, and we'll rant and rave about all that kind of stuff. So we'll just go ahead and we'll go into the blotter, and we'll go ahead and call this one for the night. So this one's going to be a doozy. Got a couple of these here. So this one is, well, let me give you the first one. So have you ever heard of, the firebug? Like there'll be like some guy who he wants to be a fireman, or maybe he is a fireman, and he's just waiting for the right time to make himself the hero. So there's this broken individual who will go out and start a fire so they can be in the right place at the right time to make themselves a hero. Well, apparently, this is not just a phenomenon with firebugs. In New York State, a New York State trooper, I guess former trooper, has been sentenced for faking a shooting. And I believe let's see here, a former trooper has been sentenced to 6 months in jail and 5 years probation for fabricating a story about being shot by a motorist. So he shot himself. And then the sentence followed former New York State Trooper Thomas J. Mesquia's guilty plea in May to charges of tampering with physical evidence, false reporting an incident, and official misconduct. The incident occurred October 30th, 2024, when Mesquia, 28, claimed he was shot by a motorist after initiating a traffic stop. An investigation revealed that Mesquia had shot himself in the leg and staged the scene to support his false report. Evidence showed he placed 22 caliber shell casings on the ground and drove to various locations, including his home, before returning to the parkway to report the shooting. And apparently, one of the CBS News reported that the DA said they believed, quote, "There's an ex-girlfriend he was trying to impress, and we believe he wanted the public to see him as a hero." Oh boy, that's a good one. The second one comes out of California, and I don't think they're giving the guy's name. This comes out of Hollywood. Retired wrestler beats robber to bloody pulp after he demanded Rolex. That's awesome. Altercation happened Wednesday at 1 p.m. in the 900 block of North Swetzer Street, Sweetser Avenue. I guess you guys got Sweetsered. Just minutes from West Hollywood City Hall. A former athlete who opted to stay anonymous described the incident to NBC4. A small black sedan pulled up. A guy jumped out with a gun, came at me, and attacked me. But what the mugger did not know was that his attempted victim had a fighting background, which he promptly put to good use. The man said, I was able to disarm him and take the gun from him. I had him pinned down as he was trying to get up. The attempted robbery could have been fatal. Let's see. The wrestler said the gun was loaded when they pulled the chamber back. One popped out of the chamber, so it was ready to go. So, yeah, a jump out boy tried to shake down a guy. That's what we call that, by the way. It's called a jump out boy. There's so yeah, wrestler, retired wrestler makes good, makes us all happy. So now the final thing for the police blotter, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it right now, but I'm going to have, and I can't help myself. I apologize if this attitude that I'm about to give you seems unkind or seems dripping with I told you so's, because I have been beating the drum on this since the beginning of the podcast. And it is sports gambling. So the headline is, and I'm sure you've all heard, Chauncey Billups, others arrested an FBI probe linking NBA to mafia gambling ring. More than 30 people, including NBA head coach Chauncey Billups and player Terry Rozier, have been arrested as part of federal investigations into gambling and, quote, sports rigging, unquote. Operations linked to major crime families. Let's see here. The La Costa, the New York announced historic arrest. Both envelopes at both NBA and La Cosa Nostra, according to Cash Patel. Head coach of the Trailblazers, and then Rozier Miami Heat, former players Damon Johns were taken into custody today. And I guess there's going to be a lot more people and all this kind of stuff. So this is the thing. And this is going to be big. This is, well, we'll see. We'll see if the NBA is able to kind of clamp this down, pay it off, and do whatever. But, I was never for Pete Rose getting into the Hall of Fame. For those of you that are new around here, we're based in Cincinnati. And I've lived in Cincinnati a long time. Not originally from here, but I've been here a long time. Pete Rose went around for many, many years saying he did not bet on baseball. And he did bet on baseball. And I knew he bet on baseball because I knew his bookie. I also, because I knew people that were involved in all of this, I even went at the time and read that, whatever that, I have a copy of it. It's probably it's on the shelf. It's the report that they put out, the Major League Baseball put out, and that they had Pete dead to rights on the gambling thing. And the thing is, it was Pete's story always changed, and Pete did a lot of shitty things. And I don't want to say bad things about Pete because Pete's dead. And I never hated Pete, but I knew he was guilty, and a lot of people made excuses for him. But it was, I never bet on baseball, and then it was, I never bet on the Reds, and then it was, he goes, well, I never bet against the Reds. And what the average person that doesn't want to understand how this works, because again, I've also had I've had contacts and run-ins with organized crime, serious organized crime people, and not just like Cincinnati bullshit, people out of New York. Once you're in with these people, you're in. And you're affecting the line one way or the other. You're affecting the line by betting. You're affecting the line by not betting. You're affecting the line by, all these other things. And so if you can affect the line, and you start getting in hock to these people very quickly, there's opportunities to make money or to influence outcomes, especially today. Like I say all you guys, like there's a bunch of you listening to this that gamble, and way more about gambling than I do. I understand the basic concept of 21, and I kind of understand poker a little bit. But I don't really understand gambling. Okay. Like, I mean, I know math. Um, and there's so many things now that you can bet on beyond just the game, that there's so many opportunities for corruption here. I mean, just even for fun. Like, this is just for fun, but it's still real. There are people placing bets in the WNBA as to whether the one chick, the black girl who is Caitlin Clark's nemesis, um, will make the first shot she makes in the game, whether she'll actually make it or not. And it's become this meme thing. But I mean, whether who's going to score first, what's going to be the spread, how many times someone's going to get tackled, I don't know. Like, you can, there's so many different ways you can bet and so many different opportunities, and this is a problem. And here's the thing: baseball had this issue in 1919 with the Black Sox scandal, and coincidentally enough, the Cincinnati Reds at the 1919 World Series. And people were questioning the integrity of the game, because the entire game was based on stats and based on like just all these statistics. And if, like, everybody's trying to do the best they can, and if all of this is undermined, the underlying statistics of the game are undermined. The idea of, like, who's got the most home runs, who's got the best batting average, if none of this is all this can be manipulated, none of this is real, the game falls apart. And this is why baseball to this day runs very, very, very differently than the NFL. Baseball runs much more like the UFC, because baseball was on the verge of being destroyed. Congress is going to get involved. There's the whole they get that, they get an exemption for the running a monopoly or whatever it is, or like I can't remember what they call it off the top of my head. But they brought in Judge Landis because he was this person beyond reproach, this old man judge, and he basically, what he said goes. You're out, you're out, you're out, and you're out. Fuck you and the horse you rode it on. You're banned for life. I don't give a fuck. My rules. He's the Pope of baseball. And the Pope of baseball is supposed to keep the bullshit at bay. Because if you don't keep the people in line, you're going to ruin the golden goose. The NFL is so out of control. That doesn't run right because of Goodell, and then the owners, and they hire Goodell, and then all this crap, and all this drama and bullshit with the politics and issues, and then just all of it, like who's going to play that beats their wives and who's not going to play who beats their wives. None of this shit fucking happen if the NFL ran like the UFC. Okay? And it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm not that familiar with how the NBA runs. I feel like it does run a little bit more. It's a little bit more adult operated. Like, there's somebody in charge. Like, it's just not, like, it's not a free for all like the NFL. But I'm telling you, it's going to be really interesting. Whether this turns into a big scandal or not, internally in every sport, it's not just in the NBA, but in baseball and soccer and all of this stuff, this betting stuff with the players they're going to all be talking about it, and there are going to be issues, and they're going to be thinking about it, especially Dana White, a degenerate gambler like Dana White. I like Dana White. I like him quite a bit. And Dana White, I'd be real curious one day to hear what his opinion is on this, because Dana White always, in my opinion, seems like he tells the truth. And I think a lot of you guys are going to be really shocked if it turns out the mafia is in this more than what you're thinking, or more than what you may have realized. So I'm going to get off it. That's the end of the blotter. Well, this wraps up episode 3-6 of the John 911 podcast. You want to see more stories or pictures, links, stuff like this? Please go to the website at john1911.com. That's JOH1911.com. Remember, it's all about shooting guns and not gambling on baseball. Everybody, have a good night.